I made a mistake and my colleague took advantage of it to sabotage my interests. Am I the one who reported it to the police? I've 29 degrees Fa officially had it and am starting a campaign of relatively benign psychological warfare against one of my coworkers, Dan. Dan started at the company on November 23rd and seemed cool at first, but I've slowly grown to find him very annoying. Nicotine addiction and a self-professed problem with following the rules. WTF, why would you brag about this at work? He is my same AG in role FTR. I also arguably have a nicotine addiction, but I don't make it obvious at work. So a few days ago I regrettably had a horrifying emergency on my way into work. It happened quickly, and while I was unmuted on a work call with my whole team. I am diagnosed with panic disorder. Edit, I am not supposed to discuss the details of this situation, as it is an open case with local law enforcement. On my way to work, I was arrested and held in jail for 36 hours. I had a panic attack while being arrested and 5 more while in jail because I was denied access to my prescribed medications. Me, my other co-workers, my family, my friends, and the larger local community, not the cops, have been extremely supportive. Think what you want, but the police, and I will probably never be able to trust them again. I was indisposed for a couple of days after the emergency, and when I returned, my work computer was still in my office building, which I never reached, so I couldn't do any actual work. These people at this company were incredibly supportive, sent me kind messages, and were generally concerned for my well-being, having directly heard me go through this ordeal in real time, and I still feel mortified, so their support really means the world. A few co-workers even contacted every person I had scheduled meetings with to let them know I had an emergency. 7 years. Dan has appeared to have taken this opportunity, my traumatic emergency, to highlight my shortcomings when my coworkers were exchanging messages of support and concern about me. Dan sent no such messages, and he didn't ask how he could help. Instead, he inserted an absolutely useless recommendation into the team group chat about how I could have avoided this emergency in the first place. He immediately was so obvious that this would have happened to me because of the choices I made leading up to it. Very she was asking for it in that dress. If you ask me, gross. Then I am finally recovered enough to look at my phone. A couple days after the emergency, I get a message from a PM that I work with asking me about the status of a report that I had put Dan in charge of. The PM tells me that they spoke with Dan yesterday and that Dan said the report was conversation that I had suffered a major emergency that Dan had witnessed the day before, that I was present indisposed, and that I would likely need some time to recover. Dan had never informed me prior to the emergency that the report was ready for me to review. He kept saying he had one more task to complete. Despite the chaos and trauma of that terrible event, I feel renewed gratitude for my life, freedom, and everyday privileges. I feel even more protective of it now that things can change in an instant in ways you couldn't imagine. I don't have any more time for this, so I feel justified in canceling Dan for my life. I'm not going to try to get him fired or anything, but I refuse to spend my days in close proximity to him at the office. My desk away from his, he can say goodbye to any and all opportunities to support me on my projects. I no longer trust him to be a reliable and respectful team player, and most importantly, if he confronts me, which he might because he's alarmingly confrontational, I will calmly explain to him that I find his professionalism and working style to be unaligned with what I'm looking for in my projects and career. And the PM his messages about one more task to complete, and express your surprise that he didn't mention this when the PM asked him about it, especially since he knew you would be unavailable for several days. Then disengage from him in the workplace. Oopie, this is exactly the plan. Thank you for your support. Comment, crucify him the first chance you get. Luck, and I hope you're doing better now. Oop, absolutely diabolical. I love it. Thank you. I am feeling much better. A few more tough days ahead, I'm afraid, but I'm taking it day by day. Comment, you are an inspiration. I am sending grandma hugs your way. Oh, thank you so much. Comment, you're very welcome. I'm so sorry you had to go through such a traumatic event, and honestly, as a mother of 3 daughters, I am so incredibly impressed with how you are handling all. Was almost like, wait, mom, lel, my mom isn't a grandma quite yet. Soon though. Comment, lol, I'm actually not a grandma either. My daughters are more than old enough, but I have 2 of them that are like no way at all, and my oldest is like maybe in the next couple of years, so I always say I'll send your grandma hugs because I'm old enough with their lives or me being a grandma. If they want kids, I want them to have them. If they don't, I couldn't care less. Which I must admit seems shocking to ladies my age, because when I tell them this they look at me like, how can you say that? I just have a great time with my daughters. I think they are funny, smart, intelligent, and amazing. I just love spending time with them. Accident, but I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was profiled as someone the police wanted to target, and they targeted me without checking themselves. I spent 36 hours in jail talking with multiple other women. You would be surprised at how many people are there without knowing why, and it's not because they're on drugs. Since you asked, I was trying to help someone and was mistakenly and forcibly arrested by police while raiding a Prots. In addition to the panic attack I had during the arrest, I had about 5 more over the next 12 hours while being ignored and laughed at by officers who were supposed to keep me safe. By the time I got out of jail, I was a zombie and couldn't spell my own name. My job involves manual labor. 2 months later, I felt like posting an update. See original post. All my charges for misdemeanors for resisting arrest were dismissed because the police arrested me unlawfully. I am also moving forward with civil litigation against the police department. I thought about just dropping it and moving on with my life, but then I saw the police body cam footage and Brought my partner and father to tears. They are not criers. My mother was hysterical and couldn't even get through the first few minutes. She said watching her child be held down and beaten while I was crying and screaming for help was too much for her to bear. I'm shaking even recounting it now. Dan still works at my company, but we don't work together anymore. I heard he got put on a PIP, but no one really confirmed the WME, which is business. I'm doing great at work. I've always felt good about my job performance. BC, as I mentioned in the original post, I love my coworkers and my work really matters to me. I also stopped drinking and smoking, and I'm 10 days sober, which has been amazing for my productivity and mental health. Still addicted to nicotine, damn zins, but that's the next thing to go, taking it one step at a time. Thanks to all the kind internet strangers for your. I hope you don't hear about it because the video is still mortifying for me, even though I did nothing wrong other than panicking, which isn't really wrong given the circumstances. My identity will be exposed, and I'll have to make a new Reddit account. I hope Dan doesn't have Reddit and finds this, but he knows what I think about him. Great for you for quitting drinking and smoking. That's amazing. Keep going one step at a time, one day at a time. Take care. We're pulling for you. Now to the next story. Story 2. When my husband had lupus, my parents abandoned me during pregnancy. They returned years later wanting to be grandparents but never apologized. Desire to become grandparents. I severed my relationship with my parents 3 years ago after it became clear to them that my sister was more important to them than my husband, me, or their grandson. For background, after nearly a year of symptoms, my spouse was diagnosed with lupus during my second trimester after multiple testing and hospital stays. Of course, when I told my parents, they promised to do everything in their power to support me during my pregnancy, and after the baby was delivered. Despite our tense prior history, I believed we were becoming closer since my sister moved away after her marriage 7 years ago. Thus their pledge meant a lot to me during her time here. My parents always emphasized her as the golden child after she moved away and got preoccupied with her life. I believed I had only seen as a stand-in for their favorite daughter. When my sister came home months after my baby was born and announced her divorce due to her husband's infidelity, my parents spent all their time with her and forgot about me and my relatives. I was heartbroken because my husband and I were still adjusting to his diagnosis and frequent doctor appointments. They had pledged to help with the baby because of his illness. Always able to rely on my spouse at home, even though I was angry with my parents and never blamed him. My parents once became irate and told me that my sister was more important to them than I was, especially if I were to compare her to my own family. They claimed that although my sister was their family, my husband and son were neither. I quickly ended the call, blocked them, and never spoke to them again because that sentence was so upsetting. Of my head, I've kept them out of my life ever since, and I want to continue doing so, but my in-laws stepped up and provided us with excellent care. They would visit every other day to help with the baby and everything else because they knew my husband was struggling even during my pregnancy. Even though we got along fine without my parents' help, it still hurt that they didn't even think of my husband and son, especially their grands. 3 years we can afford to hire a full-time nurse, and last year my husband's web development company took off. We now operate our business from home. After I resigned my job to work with him, it is a practical arrangement. My parents unexpectedly arrived with a slew of gifts a few days after we celebrated our son's 3rd birthday. Since we hadn't spoken for 3 years, they hadn't tried to get in touch, so I was shocked to see them. They didn't even recognize had come to meet their grandson and wanted to become grandparents. Instead of apologizing, I laughed, closed the door, and refused to interact since their actions were so absurd after what they said the last time we spoke. Their statement that my husband and son were neither their family nor their responsibilities is still fresh in my mind. My husband and in-laws remained silent until I had composed myself, then they talked to me about 30 minutes later and advised me to talk to my parents again, even though I didn't want them to meet my son yet. My spouse and his parents think I should at least listen to them and consider giving my parents an opportunity to explain themselves because they still made the effort to show there. Even though it's been 3 years, at least I'll feel good about giving them an opportunity, even if it doesn't work out and they blew it. I followed my instructions. I truly appreciate that my spouse and in-laws weren't forcing their opinions on me. I know that their counsel was given out of care, but I simply don't want to speak with my folks. I don't feel ready. I've always had a tense relationship with my parents, and after that most recent argument, I decided I wouldn't talk to them unless they truly apologized, which they haven't done. When they recently appeared, they didn't apologize, and I'll need time to determine if they're sincere or just want to keep in touch with their grandchild. Been their top priority, and they have never treated me well, but I acknowledge that I may regret not giving my parents an opportunity to clarify their position and make amends, as my husband and in-laws have pointed out. I'm unsure of what to do and am bewildered after 3 years of no communication. Am I mistaken for not wanting to speak with my parents? Thanks for your help. Parents, their actions have still caused me much emotional pain. They still haven't apologized, and I had decided not to talk to them until they did. They had the chance to apologize when they arrived the other day but chose not to. After I shut them out, they tried to talk to me through the door, claiming we could resolve the matter. It's okay, I've gone 3 years without speaking to anyone. I've talked about this, and we don't have any animosity. This choice isn't causing us any conflict. They knew how distressed I was when my parents contacted me, so they were only offering me advice out of concern. They don't argue or put pressure on you. Since several comments seemed to cast doubt on their motives, I just wanted to clarify. Quite kind when I told them how I felt and that I wasn't ready to talk to them, they assured me that they would respect my choice and not put any pressure on me even if I didn't feel ready at any time after that, and they made it clear that they would support me in making the best decision for myself since they trusted me to do so. I appreciate their understanding, but I just don't feel ready to talk to my parents right. With me since their visit nearly a week ago, I'm not sure why they made the sudden attempt to get in touch after 3 years, but I have a feeling they might try again. If they do, they must apologize before I engage them. Second update. My sister messaged me on Instagram earlier this week to ask if we could have lunch because she was in the area and I hadn't blocked her despite our lack of animosity. We're teenagers, things have been peaceful ever since I was hesitant to meet her at first, but I accepted her message because it seemed genuine. We haven't communicated much in the last 3 years, usually just sharing birthday and holiday greetings. In spite of my suspicion that she would eventually bring up our parents, meeting her wasn't as awkward as I had expected. We started a conversation. She said she has lived close by since her divorce. Meeting with me earlier, we both knew that was untrue. We had just not given each other priority. But I accepted her excuse because it would have been embarrassing to admit that straight. She told me that after spending her first year back with our parents, she moved to a suburban home and now lives with her partner. She also disclosed that she recently got engaged. I congratulated her and expressed my happiness for her. She eventually brought up our parents after meeting up. Things took an unexpected turn at this point since she has always gotten along with them and they have always put her first. I expected her to stand up for them, although it wasn't her fault. She never seemed to bother. Instead, she informed me that she is currently at odds with them. She acknowledged that she wanted to talk to me about a few things. Since I didn't think she needed to apologize because our parents, not her, were the source of my problems. But she clarified that her recent altercation with them had caused her to consider what she had done. Even though she knew our parents preferred her, she felt bad about how she had treated me in the past, and for never challenging them. She regretted not doing more to address the dynamic she was aware of. I urged her not to be ridiculous. Not her were the issue. She acknowledged that she let things proceed the way our parents wanted, but she stated she should have stood up for me. Although I truly appreciated her addressing it, I told her that I didn't blame her and that she didn't need to feel sorry. She then began to explain why she and our parents were at odds. She got engaged to her boyfriend, which apparently upset them because they thought it was too soon after her divorce. They were inappropriate to think of getting married again so soon, but my sister didn't care. She explained that she had lost interest in her ex-husband even before her divorce, before she found out about his affair. They had been dragging their marriage along for more than a year, and she believed that our parents were being self-centered by expecting her to put off moving on because they were afraid of rumors. I don't think anyone would find this situation intriguing enough to engage in gossip. Her timing is fine, and she was also arguing with them about having kids. As if that wasn't bad enough, she is an independent woman who does not owe our parents grandchildren, so I found it incomprehensible that she was still answerable to them for her own choices. While they were discussing whether it was right for her to get engaged so quickly, she mentioned my sister's biological clock, saying it was time for her to consider starting a family. My sister had to explain that she had no intention of having children, either now or ever, and planned to live a childless life. Our parents were even more horrified by this discovery, and her decision to stay childless only exacerbated each other since this argument got out of hand and caused a significant fallout. My sister broke down at the restaurant. While she was telling me this, it was obvious that she wasn't managing the issue effectively. I did everything in my power to console her since she had dedicated her entire life to avoiding failing our parents. I could see how difficult it must be for her. She actually said that even when she started experiencing problems in her first marriage, she continued to be in the poisonous relationship because our parents didn't think divorce was the answer because marriage had not ended well before his affair ended it. Her ex-husband had been poisonous and they had fought nearly every day. My sister decided to go her own way this time, even if it meant disappointing our parents. Even though she loved them and didn't want to lose them, she told me she couldn't keep living her life according to their wishes, especially since attempted to persuade her that having a child would resolve all of their marital issues in her prior marriage. But she claimed that because her ex-husband was so toxic, having a child with him would have made matters worse, so she had escaped a bullet. She told me that she had never wanted children and that she had made a lot of choices just to appease our parents, such as studying business in college instead of following her. I felt terrible for her as she broke down and started crying as I tried to console her. After years of stress and hardship, this mature woman was finally crumbling. I realized how foolish it had been of me to believe that her life was ideal. Our parents put a lot of pressure on her, and she had been fighting to survive all the time. That same pressure has also caused a rift between us. As though we were unrelated to one another, in actuality we were sisters, and our parents had destroyed our bond. One refused to allow them to continue to rule our lives. I assured my sister that she could now confide in me about anything. After so many years of avoiding me, I was happy that she had decided to speak with me. I informed her that she didn't need to allow our parents to make her feel bad because she wasn't doing anything wrong. I encouraged her, telling her she didn't need our parents' approval anymore, and gave her a pep talk. As shown by her first marriage, following their wishes hadn't worked out for her, and she was mature enough to make her own decisions. While I couldn't promise that her new marriage would work out, I assured her that if it did, she would be responsible for it and not have to hold anyone else accountable. I also mentioned that our parents had come to see me recently to patch things up, but they didn't come to apologize. I won't let them treat my son like a placeholder because he's not. My sister looked scared when I told her about our parents' visit. The timing was too shady. They arrived at my home trying to infiltrate my son's life when they abruptly discovered that their favorite daughter wouldn't be bearing them grandchildren anytime soon. I'm glad I chose to have lunch with my sister that day to work things out despite my initial skepticism. I'm glad I accepted the lunch at all. I discovered many things I should have known, but most importantly, I learned that my sister's life was not as idyllic as I thought. Aware of what I said to my sister, and I have discussed everything with my husband since it's obvious that my parents weren't here with the best of intentions. They are adamantly opposed to me making amends with them now. Their hidden agendas were repulsive. My sister and I have stayed in contact ever since. Despite her initial wish for reconciliation, she has made the decision to completely cut off contact with our parents. She acknowledged they didn't a lot of pressure on her for years. She told me that she didn't even know who she was for a long time because she had spent so much of her life trying to please them. It may sound cheesy, but for her that's the real deal. She's had enough now, and I'm happy that she's standing up for herself. We both need our parents to keep their distance and let us live our lives as we see fit. They've caused enough harm. Third update: my sister and I needed this, but we weren't aware of it until now, so I'm glad we're getting back in touch. That lunch talk made us realize how horribly our parents treated us. Last week, our parents tried to get in touch with us again since we've blocked them everywhere else. They sent us an email with a patronizing tone, as if they were doing us a favor. We told them to avoid us, to gain their favor, but it's obvious now that we can't win with them. We no longer want to be good daughters to them because they weren't good parents to either of us. We cut them off after sending them our last response. They haven't made another attempt to get in touch since. I hope they leave us alone at last. That negativity is not what I want in my life. They are awful people in addition to being bad parents. I'm glad I stopped seeing them. All honesty, though it seems more like Stockholm Syndrome, I'm here to support her while she deals with it. Now we've become much closer, and I'm even helping organize her wedding. It says a lot. All I can hope for is that everything goes smoothly, and that our parents stay out of it. Fourth update: last week my sister got married. I had a great time serving as a bridesmaid. They kept it quiet and small. I don't see why my parents couldn't get along with her. It's pitiful that our parents weren't able to approve of this, because they were worried about what unimportant people would think. My sister and I are clearly getting along well these days, and we're actually quite close friends. Our parents haven't contacted us in a while, but they informed us via email about 5 months ago that they were giving everything. Because we are ungrateful brats, I'm not sure why they felt the need to inform us of that or what they expected to happen next. They must be disappointed that we didn't go pleading for their pardon, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm content with my life, my son, my spouse, and my in-laws, who are far superior to my parents. My sister is content with her spouse, too. To get more surprising real-life tales, click the notification bell. Peaks rise sharply as I viewed my wife's phone photos. The air, once comforting to my spirit, suddenly suffocated me. I couldn't help but notice how each snapshot was a meticulously crafted illusion, a facade that concealed the truth beneath its glossy surface. She had called it a solo hike, which now lodged in her throat like a bitter pill. I struggled to accept the bitter truth that she had been so enthusiastic about it. A weekend escape to the majestic Cascades, a sanctuary for my restless mind. My dear, she purred, her lips brushing against mine in a farewell that carried the weight of familiarity, leaving an indelible mark upon my very being. For weeks an unsettling air had enveloped her, a delicate change in her demeanor, a distant gaze that spoke of unspoken thoughts in her eyes. I saw the flicker of something deeper, a subtle recoil. From my touch in the stillness of night, I attributed it to the weight of her demanding job, to the relentless stress that seemed to seep into every corner of her being, a long simmering worry that always managed to weave itself into the fabric of my understanding. In my misguided attempts to embody the understanding and supportive partner she so often required, I found myself ensnared in a web of my own making. Yet beneath the surface of my dutiful facade, a chilling sense of foreboding took root. A persistent murmur that echoed in the recesses of my mind, refusing to fade into silence. The photos showed tall pines in a stunning backdrop. Stood sentinel over jagged peaks that reached for the heavens, and sunlight danced through the leafy canopy above. Amidst the radiant tapestry of wild flowers, she emerged as a vision of beauty in every frame, her cheeks aglow with a warmth of effort, a sincere smile dancing in her eyes. It was a seemingly flawless journey undertaken alone, but beneath the surface it was anything but. A single photograph seized my gaze, drawing me into. She sat gracefully upon a rugged outcrop, the expansive valley unfolded behind her, a crumpled emerald tapestry in the foreground, and a subtle metal shimmer in the lower right corner. It was a watch, an extraordinary creation I bought for my dear friend Eddie's milestone birthday. The world seemed to bend toward the mountain, and the air became heavy and oppressive, like it was reaching out with unseen claws. Eddie, my dearest friend, with whom I had shared innumerable pints, entrusted with my deepest fears and insecurities, had steadfastly supported me on the day I pledged my love for another. As the betrayal struck with the force of a fist to the abdomen, I felt an overwhelming surge of fury, pain, and incred. As I browsed through the photographs, my hands trembled unsteadily. My gaze intent and probing, seeking the hidden stories in each frame. A fleeting glimpse caught my eye, a corner of a familiar blue backpack Eddie favored on his solitary hikes and a pair of hiking boots a shade darker than hers peeking out in one of the photographs. The puzzle's fragments began to coalesce into a chilling tableau of betrayal. My emotions were restrained like a tempest inside me that never broke out. In the quiet of my mind, I needed time to gather my thoughts and create a coherent strategy. I refused to let them take advantage of my weakness. When Madison entered that evening, she exuded vitality, with rosy cheeks and sparkling eyes. My demeanor as cold as winter's breath. It fills my heart with joy to know that you enjoyed yourself, my love. With a voice that expressed no conflict I responded, then gracefully retreated despite the stress of unfinished work needing my attention. My mind was preoccupied with planning my next move for the rest of the night. I had to experience their offenses firsthand to eliminate any doubts in the peaceful corners of the living room. I placed a little hidden camera on the couch, where they would start their routine every time he visited. I wanted proof. I wanted to see everything for myself. The days that follow are a terrifying waltz of lies. Madison appeared unaffected by the changes in her surroundings, interacting with me with a mix of familiarity and aloofness. I acted as the unsuspecting husband, offering smiles and nods while a storm of rage brewed within. On Friday night, Madison casually mentioned her plans to spend the evening with friends, signaling a clan meeting with Eddie. The camera captured every moment, and Eddie emerged with a grin, claiming dominance. Eddie lingered as Madison's skin paled and her eyes widened in fright. Frozen as if snared by an unseen force, a shadow of a man in that fleeting instant. What on earth is this? I unleashed a thundering roar in the hushed stillness of the room. Madison's voice trembled as her dishonesty unraveled before her eyes. My sweetheart, the reality is different from what your eyes see. Do you feel that, Madison? What's it? I unleashed a sharp spit, the act of defiant punctuation in the stillness of the moment. Is it merely a casual gathering among friends while I am away, or a clandestine meeting of lovers unfolding in the shadows of my absence? Whom do you believe you are deceiving? I shifted my gaze to Eddie, my closest companion, the betrayer of trust. The betrayal pierced through the heart with a pain that eclipsed all fury. How dare you, a spineless wretch, presume to call yourself my friend in the very heart of my home? You sat at my table indulging in the meals I prepared, sipping from the very bottles that filled my fridge, all the while entwined with my wife. A betrayal so profound it pierced the very fabric of my existence. I found myself quaking, a tempest of rage and revulsion coursing through me. He began to stutter, his visage contorted in a tableau of dread. Listen, I have a story to tell. Reluctance washed over me, a heavy tide that pulled me away from the words I knew were coming. With a sudden burst of energy I propelled myself toward him. My fist met his jaw with a jarring impact, a sound that echoed like a grim punctuation mark in the air. He staggered backward, his gaze filled with a profound dread. Madison screamed in amazement, covering her mouth with her hands. I pressed on, unleashing a torrent of blows on him, driven by a simmering fury. I watched him crumple to the ground, blood oozing from his nose and mouth. I wanted to ensure he felt the agony and humiliation he had inflicted on me, but I paused, ragged breath coming in. My knuckles pulsating with restraint. Leave, I screamed, my voice laced with fury. Leave my house at once, do not return. He rose abruptly, his features twisted in misery. He sheepishly fled with his tail tucked in. Madison sat on the couch, a tangle of emotions and tears, her body shivering with sorrow. I hovered above her, my heart frozen in an unforgiving chill. I desire for your departure. I said, gather your belongings and leave immediately, but her vows were empty promises. Trust was once a frail thread tying them. Broken hearts lay in the solitude as love faded. Behind the haunting image of their togetherness were short-lived photos and a web of lies that haunted me. I watched with a steady heart as she packed her suitcase, her tears a weak attempt to evoke pity. As she crossed the threshold, her gaze was heavy with trepidation and remorse, realizing the irreversible break in their connection and the stark reality of their choices in the days that followed. Slipped away in a haze, each moment blending into the next, leaving only a vague impression of time passing. With a heavy heart, I took the step to file for divorce, reaching out to our mutual friends to unveil the truth. I shared the recordings laying bare the affair that had shattered the trust between us. I ensured that each of them was acutely aware of their transgressions, and I found a twisted delight in witnessing the meticulous edifices of their lives disintegrate before my eyes. I observed as Eddie's world crumbled, cast aside by those who once called him friend. Madison's world grew smaller, her once vibrant social circle dwindling, as friends drifted away, leaving her in a silence that echoed with betrayal. The betrayal loomed large, an insurmountable chasm between them so profound and unforgivable that it was evident they would forever be haunted by its shadow, unable to reclaim the innocence they once possessed. It failed to alleviate the ache, the profound void that had taken root within my soul, yet it offered a glimmer of something more. There was a profound sense of fulfillment in witnessing justice unfold, a deep-seated knowledge that they were finally confronting the consequences of their treachery and falsehoods. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to forge ahead and find healing. I learned from experience that trust is fragile and difficult to restore.